Hiya! Whisper here. 4th recording, because the first 3 sucked. I've been recording for like 2.5 hours now, and they all suck, and I am mentally unstable. I am unwell. I'm gonna take a sip of my water, and then let's talk about M+. Hopefully, in an organized manner. I don't know if I'm capable of that, but we're gonna try. Of course, with MapleStory music in the background. So, let's say you're new to Assassination, and some unhinged guy is telling you that he's about to talk about M+. What are the things you need to know? Step 1, energy, giga important. Energy is how the world works. Energy is how you cast your abilities. Energy is your one true god. And that comes from Venomous Wounds. Right? Venomous Wounds, every time Garrote or Rupture deal bleed damage to a poison target, you get energy back, and that energy is what keeps the motor going on Assassination. Without energy, your spec will slowly shrivel up and die, and you will be doing negative damage. Not actually, but, you know. So, important, always cleave Garrote and Rupture if you need energy. If you have enough energy, you can stop, but you need to have enough energy to cast abilities all the time. That is #1 priority. Then you have your bleeds that you cast for damage, right? Bleeds for energy, bleeds for damage. What contributes to that? First of all, you have Improved Garrote. Improved Garrote makes your Garrote deal increased damage and have no cooldown when used from stealth. So you can cleave out multiple empowered Garrotes that deal some pretty good damage. Then you have Crimson Tempest, which is a bleed. Doesn't do instant damage, so don't spam it, just maintain it. And this does increase damage based on how many enemies are afflicted. This does a lot. This is a big, big ability that you need to maintain on 3 or more targets all the time. It's a little bit confusing to read at first glance because of the extra damage when multiple enemies are afflicted line. But just as a quick breakdown. Real quick breakdown. When you have 1 target, multiple enemies are not afflicted, so it doesn't do extra damage. When you have 2 targets, multiple enemies are inflicted, 20% per target is 20%, 40%. 3 targets, you have 20%, 40%, 60%, right? At 5 targets, it's 100%. So we only cast this on 3 or more, that's when it becomes worth it. 2, if you fat finger it, not the end of the world because you're still getting a decent amount of damage. 1 target, single target, really, really bad because you're not getting any increased damage, right? 3 targets would be 60% more than single target. So do not press this in single target, ever. Then we have other bleed effects for damage, Scent of Blood being a big one. Each enemy afflicted by a rupture increases your agility by 4% up to a maximum of 20. 20% agility is really good. It's really strong. And this is part of what makes Assassination really strong in AoE and Dragonflight. I think Sense of Blood alone is carrying a lot of the spec. But we'll get into that more when I talk about priority damage. Then we also have a couple of passives attached to it, right? So we have Shrouded Suffocation. It increases Garrote damage. This is completely passively, doesn't have to be from stealth. And then from stealth, you get 2 additional combo points. This helps speed up your openers quite a bit. So this is really good to have. Then you have Bone Spike. Bone Spike is the same as the Shadowlands version. 3 charges, throws a spike, does damage, adds an infinite dot, gives you combo points back. Real quick, just to show you what that looks like, if I were to open on this, right, and I use a Rupture, you'll see that it cleaves 3 targets, throws out my 3 spikes, and then fills my combo points back up. So that helps accelerate our openers quite a bit, getting those 3 bone spikes out. These charges reset when a target dies, or if 30 seconds go by, so it's a 30-second cooldown. So on every opener in Mythic Plus, on every pack, you'll have 3 charges, right? And that just refills your combo points and you're good to go. Sudden Demise. also a good talent, but some people kind of misunderstand how it works. So the bleed damage is, again, passive, all bleed damage, Rupture, Garrote, Crimson Tempest, Bone Spike, all of that. Targets below 35% health instantly bleed out and take fatal damage when the remaining bleed damage you would deal to them exceeds 150% of their remaining health. That's a lot of words. If the target has 100 health left, right, you need to have 150 damage worth of bleeds on the target, and Sudden Demise will kill it. So it's still inefficient, right? You're dealing 100 damage, even though your bleeds have 150 damage left. However, this is loss prevention. So normally, without this, when a target dies, you just lose all of your dot damage, right? This is completely wasted damage. However, with Sudden Demise, if you get to that threshold, Sudden Demise will recover some of that damage and deal it instantly. So you're only losing a third of the damage of your remaining bleeds, not 100%. So this is really good, especially in like lower dungeons, normals, and heroics right now with the start of the expansion, because you're getting some free damage off of that, right? You're recovering a lot of that because targets aren't living your full, 30-second ruptures. They're only surviving for maybe 10. So you're getting a lot of that damage back from Sudden Demise, right? So that's on the bleed side of things. Then we have Caustic Spatter. This is the other big thing for Assassination. This is Blade Flurry for Outlaw Rogues, but as a debuff. So using Mutilate on a target afflicted by Rupture and Deadly Poison applies this debuff. Its limit to 1, so you pick one target that you can Blade Flurry off of. It deals 45% of your poison damage onto nearby enemies reduced beyond 5. Now, a big point of confusion, what is poison damage? Everything. Legitimately everything. So, Deadly Poison is poison damage. Amp Poison is poison damage. Poison Bomb is poison damage. At least for Caustic, right? It's nature damage, but, Kingsbane, nature damage. Also Caustic. Envenom, finishing move, instant nature damage. Also Caustic Spatter. You have Fatebound coins. The Tails coin does cosmic damage. That spatters. Then you have Deathstalker marks dealing plague damage. That spatters. Clear the Witnesses spatters. Hunt them down spatters. These is all plague damage stuff. So everything nature damage applies through Caustic Spatter. So this is your main form of damage once you have all of your bleeds up, right? The general gameplay that's being formed here is bleeds first for energy, for agility, for combo points, right? Getting all your bleeds up, all your bleeds rolling, your opener is going quick, all your bleeds up, and then you pick a target and you Caustic Spatter. That is the core rotation here, right? So let's move over to the class tree for a second, explain some choices that I have here. We have Thistle Tea. Thistle Tea is just the go-to, always. Energy, mastery, good stuff. Maximum energy, also good. Energy regen, also good. This is just a good row. Then you have Deeper Stratagem, Alacrity. These are also locked in at all times. Deeper Stratagem, really strong. Alacrity, it's okay, it's good enough. And then for Fatebound, you have Inevitability and Cold Blood. So this is a must-take for Fatebound. Deathstalker has a little bit more leeway with what it takes right now because of the bug with Echoing Reprimand. I'll go over that more in the hero talents. But for now, right, Echoing Reprimand, Deathstalker, Cold Blood only works on Envenoms because Inevitability, if you read this, only applies to Envenoms, matches the last flip. So Cold Blood here is taken. Lethality, really, really strong. Increases the crit damage bonus of attacks that generate combo points by 20%. Garrote, right? Improved Garrote. All that stuff generates combo points. So that's 20% crit strike damage to Garrote. Kingsbane awards a combo point. So that's 20% damage to that Kingsbane. Crit strike damage, of course. So that's really good. Bone Spike, guess what? Generates combo points, also 20% crit damage bonus. But lethality is really, really strong. It's honestly competitive with like Echoing Reprimand on its own. Like Resounding Clarity versus lethality. Lethality wins sometimes, especially in AoE. It's really, really strong. And then we have Without a Trace. I'm going to go over that later because that is a can of worms. So before we travel on to the hero talent stuff, let's talk about some stuff that I'm not taking and not recommending, but stuff that you could play and do need to know and understand. Lightweight Shiv. This is a quality of life thing, and builds take this for Kingsbane in single target because you cover the entire Kingsbane with Lightweight Shiv. But we are very starved for points, right? There's not a lot of places where we can take this point out. Ironwire would be kind of the go-to, but I don't recommend this. We want Amplifying Poison, so like this is a very difficult point to get. In general, you can just kind of ignore Shiv and AoE as well. So we'll talk about that with Caustic, but in general, Lightweight Shiv, quality of life, not great damage. Improved Poisons, just not great. Master Assassin, just not great. Vicious Venoms, you're not pressing Ambush or Mutilate that often in Mythic Plus, only on bosses, and this isn't really that good. On Fatebound, on Deathstalker, it's okay, but it's still not great. So this is a waste of points. Then you have Twist the Knife. Envenom's duration is already really high, so this kind of sucks. Systemic Failure is only really used as a gateway point to all of this stuff, so this sucks. And then we have the interesting ones. So, Dashing Scoundrel and Tiny Toxic Blade. Dashing Scoundrel gives you some energy back, especially in AoE and single target, where you have a lot of weapon poisons critting. So, like, Thrown Precision always applies weapon poisons when your Fan of Knives crits. So, you get extra energy from Fan of Knives a lot of the time. Tiny Toxic Blade makes your Shiv free. Shiv normally costs 30 energy. This is free energy. So if you're taking Lightweight Shiv, for example, this is a lot of free energy that just you normally don't have. Blindside is a single target spell, or talent, I should say, making your next ambush free and usable without stealth. This overwrites your Mutilate, so you don't need a macro or anything. This just makes your next Mutilate turn into an ambush, but again, you're not casting that many Mutilates. You're casting a lot more Fan of Knives. So this kind of is it's only on bosses. And then we have two really good talents, but because of the gate here from Systemic Failure, Blindside, Tiny Toxic, and Vicious, these four talents, Gatekeeping, Zoldyck, and Arterial, it's hard to take these. There are builds that do, and they are viable, but you need to go through garbage in order to get to this stuff. So Zoldyck is our Execute talent. This is what gives Assassination sort of the thematic execute that we've always had. In Mythic Plus, we aren't currently taking this, but you definitely could if Execute is something that you want, or if you're going with a certain build like that. And then Arterial Precision makes your Shiv AoE and increases bleed damage done to affected targets by 30%. This is a good talent. This is really good. But again, it's locked behind a bunch of stuff that kind of sucks, so we aren't really taking this. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the hero talents, and then we'll talk about some of the archetypes that we have in our build, right? So Fatebound, I'm just going to breeze through it a little bit. You should kind of be able to know what these are. I'm not going to read everything to you. Just, you know, it's there. So heads flip, tails flip. They both do damage. They're both good. The tails coin does interact with Caustic Spatter. And then you have a bunch of other flips. Fate Intertwined is a small, it's like 1.5%, 2% overall damage. But this does help your Envenoms cleave. Deal Fate gives you an additional combo point, but it's a limit of 1. So if you crit like 7 targets, you're still only getting 1 additional. But this helps in lower target cleave. For example, if you Mutilate and both hands crit, you get 5 combo points. You just get to finish. So that's pretty cool. And then choice node wise, you have Inevitability, Destiny Defined. Destiny Defined sucks. This is really bad. Inevitability, always, everywhere, forever. Cold Blood, really good. Then you have Tempted Fate, which is just kind of the go-to. Chosen Revelry really sucks. I don't know what the point of this is. Death's Arrival is good, but niche. Inexorable March is good, but niche. So pick whatever you prefer. And then finally, the Capstone gives you an agility buff. You need to stay in combat for this agility buff, which is good for chaining and not good if you're not chaining. But we'll go into that as well. Then, Deathstalker. Deathstalker, we have a couple things. So first off, you would want to play Echoing Reprimand if they ever fix the bug. Echoing Reprimand right now doesn't work on the mark. It doesn't work on the Capstone. So the Anima Charged combo points right now kind of low. You can play with whatever you'd like. So like Cold Blood is fine. If you really must hurt me, you can play without a trace. I'll talk about why I don't recommend that in a little bit of a later section, but I've been trying to avoid it a little bit because that'll get me in trouble. But Deathstalker as a whole, you apply a mark with Ambush. It's similar to Caustic Spatter, limit 1, right? So you pick your target, you apply your mark to it, and then you deal a little bit of extra damage with your auto attacks. Singular Focus is the big key here. Damage dealt to your targets that aren't marked come back to your marked target. Now, this works with Caustic Spatter, so any Caustic Spatter damage you deal comes back to your target. And this also, of course, works with all your bleeds being spread, and this does work with Mastery, so in reality, this is more like 7% and not 5%. But Singular Focus accounts for a large amount of priority damage, and in my opinion, is the sole reason why Deathstalker would be played in high Mythic plus keys. The priority damage you get from Singular Focus alone is roughly 10% over any Fatebound build. Singular Focus alone is like a 10% increase in prio damage. So that's really good. Then you have a couple of passives. These don't really matter. And then you got choice nodes. Very simple. Lingering Darkness, always better. This thing sucks. Momentum of Despair, always better. This thing sucks. Like, we don't need to talk about it anymore. Crimson Tempest, additional damage, not great. It's just undertuned. This is just tuned better, gives you additional combo points, right? Then you have choice nodes here. Shadewalker, more Shadow Steps, more better. This is really niche for your Shroud skips. I don't really see a point in them. Having done Heroics and Shroud skipping a couple things, it doesn't seem necessary at all. So I don't know. Maybe there's a route that needs it, but whatever. Then you have Bait and Switch. This is a really, really strong defensive. Reduces your magic damage taken on evasion, which is something you don't always use. So it's basically just a free, quote-unquote, magic damage reduction. Versus Ethereal Cloak, which is an increased duration on Cloak of Shadows, which is kind of niche. Sometimes it might help. Usually it doesn't, right? Again, the Capstone, this is what you play around for the most part. When you consume the final mark or the target dies with the mark on it, you get your energy. Your next Envenom is big and deals additional damage and reapplies the mark. Reapplying the mark is the big thing here. You don't need to ambush every single pack from stealth. You don't need to vanish into ambush every single time vanish is available. You have the Capstone. This is how you're reapplying the mark 99% of the time. So keep that in mind. Build your tier 7 combo points, and you're chilling. All right. Let's talk some interactions that I think you kind of need to know. Because there are some that kind of brick some things, and some that are good, some that are bad. So I think the major one we need to talk about is Arterial Precision, Lightweight Shiv, and Improved Shiv. Now, Improved Shiv increases the damage done against the target by 30%. For poison damage, right? Nature damage. So that's Envenoms, that's your Kingsbane, all that stuff. Arterial Precision does the same, but for bleed damage, right? And then it also makes it AoE. So when we think about damage done against the target, the first thing in your head is, I'm dealing more damage. But that's not actually what's happening, because Shiv, in this regard, is a debuff, right? 30% increased nature damage taken. It's not increased nature damage done, it's increased nature damage taken. And so that comes with a bit of a problem, because we have a lot of what's called residual effects, right? Residual effects are, it deals X% of X, right? So for example, Sanguine Blades is 30% extra of Garrote, Rupture, and Crimson Tempest. You have Singular Focus, which is 5% of something else. You have Fate Intertwined, which is 30% crit strike damage of Envenom. You have Caustic Spatter, which is 45% of your poison damage, right? So all of these are called residual effects. The problem with residual effects is that they don't double dip. Oftentimes, they are reversed out. So what that means, specifically in the case of Caustic Spatter and Shiv, is that unless both targets have Shiv applied to them, you're not actually going to be doing more Caustic Spatter damage. So if I were to Shiv this target here, right, I have Caustic, let's say I put Caustic Spatter up, give me a poison. If I put Caustic Spatter up on this target, and then I Envenom, versus if I Shiv and then Envenom, those Envenoms actually deal the same amount of caustic damage. It deals more damage to the main target here, right? Because I have Shiv on that main target, but it doesn't then also double dip and do more damage to the second targets, right? So you can think of it as, if I Envenom for 100 damage on this target, I'm going to deal 45 to all of these other targets. If I Shiv, and my Envenom deals 130, I'm still only doing 45 to these targets. However, if all of these targets have Shiv, then they're all taking 30% more. So this 130 turns into old friend of the stream. 45 times 1.3, 58.5. So if all of these have Shiv, these are going to be taking 58.5 from your Caustic Spatter versus the normal 45. And this is to prevent it from double dipping, right? You can think of something like, if you played Season 3, Season 4, Gnarlroot, right? The first boss in Amyrdrasil has a phase where he takes 100% extra damage. That's a damage taken, right? The same way Shiv is. And that doesn't work. Because if you were to cleave something that is taking 100% extra damage, you would then be doing 100% extra damage, 100% extra damage, and then 45%, and then another 30%, right? So all of these multipliers would stack on top of each other. The common thing that, example that I like to give is, imagine you have like Twin Oberon, or like two big bosses, right? And they both get stunned and take 100% increased damage. If you deal an Envenom to one of them, it does 100% increased damage. Then it splashes 45% of that over, right? But if it were to multiply, and the residuals were to be affected by target multipliers, you would be doing 100% more, so you'd be doing 90% instead of 45% from Caustic, right? Because it's 100% more. If you then throw Shiv on top, you're doing 130 times 100, and then another 30% on it, right? Because you're getting Shiv from both. And so this quickly scales out of control, and in that two-target situation with both targets taking increased damage, you would be doing more damage with Caustic Spatter to the off-target than you would to the main target. So that's an abuse case that often just gets removed, right? That's why things like Caustic Spatter don't double dip. That's why things like Sanguine Blades don't double dip. That's why Fate Intertwined doesn't double dip, right? All of these things are to prevent abuse cases like that. What that means, however, is Shiv and AoE blows. Like, Shiv and AoE sucks real bad. You would only ever cast it during Kingsbane. So that's the use case, right? Like, you're increasing the damage of Kingsbane to your primary target, but it's not increasing your AoE. It's not giving you more Caustic Spatter. If you're Envenoming, that's fine. It increases damage to your target, doesn't increase Caustic Spatter, right? And so that it doesn't really work with Singular Focus. It doesn't work with Fate Intertwined. All of these things just deal the damage that they're dealing. That's important note number 1. Important note number 2 is the stealth conversation, which I dread doing every single time it comes up, but I have to address every single time because I cannot talk about M+ without talking about stealth. And before I go on this tangent, this is extremely complicated, math-wise, to model through sims. Simulations cannot do this justice. Logs are difficult to extract value from. So a lot of this conversation drives down to feel. How does it feel to not get a stealth? How does it feel to not cleave your bleeds? And it feels bad. And you are getting damage from stealth. I'm not going to sit here and gaslight you into thinking that stealth doesn't give you damage, right? Of course it gives you damage. The question is, how much damage is it giving me? And that is a insanely difficult question to answer. In the past, I've tried doing this through log analysis, through sims, and it never quite hit the mark. And this video won't do that either. But I will try and explain to the best of my abilities why you shouldn't put as much emphasis on stealth as you probably are, right? The community loves to shit on stealth, and oh my god, my tank won't let me re-stealth. But we need to talk about it because this exists. So let's have this conversation, right? First things first, why does stealth matter? What is the actual damage we're getting from stealth? What are the benefits, and why is it that a lot of people overestimate the value, right? So first thing, improved Garrote. Improved Garrote makes your Garrotes deal 50% increased damage and have no cooldown when used from stealth. Now, the 50% here, it's something, but it's not a ton, right? It goes from 100% of the Garrote's damage to 150%, and it's okay. The main benefit is in combination with Indiscriminate Carnage, where Garrote and Rupture apply to 2 additional nearby enemies. And this is sort of where a lot of the value of stealth comes from, right? So you're able to cleave a bunch of Garrotes, you're able to cleave a bunch of Ruptures, they all give you energy. The Ruptures give you Scent of Blood stacks, yada yada yada. And Indiscriminate Carnage is really good. You will not catch any Mythic Plus player not playing Indiscriminate Carnage. It is the best talent, hands down. That being said, though, Improved Garrote and Indiscriminate Carnage are 2 talents that we have on our tree, right? There are plenty of other sources of damage that exist on our tree that don't require any stealth, right? Crimson Tempest cranks. This does a absurd amount of damage. No stealth requirement at all. Doesn't even benefit from anything. Caustic Spatter, no stealth requirement. In fact, stealth mostly stands in the way of Caustic Spatter because you're too busy spreading bleeds to actually make use of it in a lot of situations. But in your cooldowns, when you're cranking into Venoms, Caustic Spatter, good damage. Lots of damage. If you're playing Fatebound, you have your Tails flips, right? Yes, you get an additional flip from stealth, but most of this stuff is just flips, right? You don't need stealth for an additional 7% agility. This just kind of happens, and when you get the buff, you chain through the dungeon, and you're good to go. Additionally, every time you stealth, you have downtime, right? If you're in stealth, you're not hitting things. And if you're not hitting things, you're not doing damage. And if you're not doing damage, your damage is lower. Now, details, in my opinion, is part of the problem here, because details is only the time you spent in combat. And so, of course, stealth is going to look great on details, because when you look at details, it's not accounting for the amount of time you spent standing in stealth, dick in hand, doing absolutely nothing. There are ways to model this. Some ways. Not the best, not the worst, but there are some ways. So let me pull this up and let's talk about it. This is Dungeonslice. This is what I'm going to be using, and this is what I suggest other people use for a majority of their dungeoneering, right? If you're going to sim yourself, Dungeonslice is kind of the way to go. Dungeonslice has problems, however, as does every single way to simulate dungeons. There is no perfect way, and there will probably never be, because it's just not possible. Dungeonslice is a boss followed by a pack of mobs and a smaller pack of mobs. So like small AoE and then cleave, like bigger target cleave. So it does this for 6 minutes, and then that's the end. Problem number one with this: while it has variance on how many targets there are, on how long those targets are surviving, sometimes it'll chain pull even, like that's something that Dungeonslice does. You still have a lot of real-world stuff missing, right? Because it's still boss, AoE, cleave, boss, AoE, cleave, right? Well, kind of. But it's very generic, right? It's meant to be like a synthetic kind of simulation that gives your character a lot of different situations that it plays in. That kind of adds up to what a dungeon is generally, right? It's an overgeneralization of what a dungeon is. And that's fine. For what it is, as like a ballpark kind of, you know, where it should be, Dungeonslice is okay. But it does a lot of things wrong based off of those assumptions, right? Like it doesn't account for targets having more health or less health. It's just a pack, right? It doesn't account for priority damage speeding up a key. It's a 6-minute sim, right? So like you lose a lot of the nuance of a 40-minute sim, for example. It doesn't have the same flow that a dungeon would have, right? If you have a chain pull 3 in a row, like 3 pulls of chain pulling in a row, and they're all 6, 7, 8 target pulls, Dungeonslice isn't going to model that. That's just how it is. It has to be like that because it has to be a synthetic of something. And so it inherently loses a lot of context. Now, some of you Mythic Plus runners might be familiar with MDT, Mythic Dungeon Tools. And there are routes here, and there's something called Dungeonroute, or MDT Sim. And this is a weak aura. I'm not going to go over how to install it or anything. But essentially what this does is it simulates the routes that you put in, which, in theory, sounds incredible, right? That sounds insane. I can choose to make this pull all of these guys. This is the biggest pull ever. And I can then export that into my SimC thing. And here we go. So many crawlers, right? Pull 2. Look at all these guys. This has problems as well, though. This has the opposite problem, almost. Where the pull that you're making is going to have no variance, right? Mythic Plus isn't a static thing. Raid bosses are kind of pretty static, but Mythic Plus, right? If you accidentally body pull this pack of mobs, if someone stands in a frontal and dies, if you're a little bit slow, if you mistime your cooldowns, the timing of all subsequent pulls goes out of whack. MDT Sim cannot account for that. It just can't. It says, here are the mobs that you're pulling. It has this much health. Your character plays through it in the sim, and it's done. So you lose all of variance. Every variance that has ever existed that Dungeonslice has relied on to give you a semi-accurate portrayal sucks for Dungeonroute as well. And if you don't believe me saying that, here is one of the SimC devs from a couple months ago, almost a year I guess, talking about Dungeonroute and Dungeonslice. He set up Dungeonroute, and he also says, a generic route suffers from the same issues as Dungeonslice has been accused of in terms of being generic and not accounting for XYZ. Dungeonroute's high customizability is cool, but also makes it less than ideal for the average user. So, teaser, no. So if you look at Dungeonslice stuff, like I am here, this is fine. This is totally okay. But Dungeonroute is, in general, let me pull up this stuff again. Dungeonroute in general, like you see here, this pull, it's going to give you weirder answers, and they're going to be slightly different. So let's compare, and you can make your decision on what you think is better. This, same build as this, right? We have Envenom, Garrote, Crimson Tempest, Rupture, Caustic, Spatter, Garrote. They're all kind of the same. Crimson Tempest is at like 10%, a little bit lower, right? And then we have all the Envenom stuff at the top. Okay. If we do it this way around, Envenom at the top, Crimson Tempest doing a lot more, Caustic, Spatter, Rupture, Garrote, right? Like, these are all kind of the similar. Caustic Spatter, 14, 13, 13, and then Crimson Tempest at the top. So it's roughly the same, except Crimson Tempest is doing a lot more in this situation in Dungeonroute. Dungeonroute probably on this pull, higher target count, more Crimson Tempest, more damage. And you can see the damage is a little bit higher, but in general, right, it's kind of roughly the same. Not that it means much, but they're comparable, right? So the question is, how do these compare to an actual dungeon? I'm glad you asked. We have this 10 Tyrannus Scythe that was done on beta, right? And you'll see Envenom at the top, and then Garrote, Crimson Tempest, Caustic Spatter, Rupture, all sort of similar. And then Sanguine Blades gets merged in Sims, right? Sanguine Blades is attributed to each of the bleeds. But if we attribute this to the 3 bleeds, right, then you'll see that the bleeds are kind of up there, and Caustic Spatter is similar, but Crimson Tempest is really high. Same as here, Crimson Tempest is pretty high. This guy gets a little bit of Garrote value that it doesn't here, and this is a much higher Garrote value. So it's like, as things shuffle around, I think in general, Dungeonroute is probably a little bit closer to reality, but you need to have an accurate route to what you're running. And that's kind of part of the problem, because it's so specific. So, with all of that said, I'm going to be using Dungeonslice. This is going to overestimate Garrotes, because Dungeonslice does that. And then let's look. Let's look at our good friend, the value of stealth, because that's what this all boils down to. Is stealth important? I'm going to show you the importance of stealth, and I want you to not freak out. Your first reaction is going to be to freak out. Do not freak out. This is the loss of stealth. Okay? Let it sink in. Breathe. Take a deep breath. 15%. That is the shiny number. However, this is 15% in a vacuum where you get 0 re-stealths. No re-stealth for 32 minutes. Okay? That's point number 1. And if you look, this is 32 minutes. 32 minutes. 32 minutes. How many stealths does our friend get? 21 stealths. So this guy is getting 21 stealths, and we are getting none in 32 minutes. Okay? So This is a gross overestimation. Like an absolute insane overestimation. However, point number 2. We have not accounted for the gain that you get. Because chain pulling inherently is better. We all agree chain pulling speeds up the dungeon. You pull more mobs, you have less downtime, you're not sitting there doing nothing. I can kind of show you what that looks like. So remember this number, 410. This is with the stealths, right? This is all the stealths, all the fun stuff, everything attached. 410. Okay, same dungeon. If you take 5 seconds off the delay between pulls, right? If you pull packs just 5 seconds faster, you're at 465. That is a 15% increase in damage. Chain pulling faster with no stealth, right? If you do it by just 3 seconds, 3 seconds faster each pull, 3 seconds less downtime, you're at 410. 410 is where we were before, when we were stealthing. We're not stealthing, we're pulling just 3 seconds faster. 3 seconds is not a lot of time. 3 GCDs goes by real quick. We're pulling 3 seconds faster, and we are keeping up with our stealth counterparts. This is insane amounts of damage, and it speeds up the key. That is the primary thing. It makes the key go faster. So you should be chain pulling, right? Chain pulling is good. We like that. This is not just damage for us as Assassination Rogues. This is damage that is for everyone. The tank is doing more damage because he's hitting things. The casters are doing more damage because they are hitting things. Being able to hit things is the single biggest increase in damage. And that is a pretty standard concept. If I'm hitting 7 things, I'm doing more damage than if I'm hitting 4 things. And so the faster you can chain, the earlier you can chain, the more you can chain, the more damage you're going to do, right? So given this context of not stealthing whatsoever, right? No stealth whatsoever, and also not pulling any faster, this looks like a big number. This is a big, big loss. But think about the context, right? Think about this guy doing his plus 10 in the same amount of time. They're geared down on beta, right? So these are all geared down. This is heroic week gear, basically. Which is why this is so slow. But he's getting 21 stealths. He's still vanishing 5 times. That's not a lot of vanishes. Look at how often this dude's vanishing. It's not that much. He could vanish more. Which then brings me to a big talent of contention that all of this has culminated up to our good friend, drumroll please, Without a Trace. There are many high-ranking rogues that are taking this. And I'm gonna say it, they're wrong. I'm not rank 1 Mythic plus anything, but if math tells me something, if I believe in numbers, any numbers at all, this talent blows. This talent sucks real hard. Problem number 1, Subterfuge, worthless. Improved Garrote over here and Carnage already 6 seconds, right, on their own. If I go into stealth and then I break stealth, this, and this, they all time out at the same time. So all of my stealth benefits already are 6 seconds. So up until this point, we have used 3 talent points on something that kind of blows, something that does absolutely nothing, and then a second point on something that does absolutely nothing. What we have lost for those 2 points is lethality, which again, crit strike damage on our Garrote, which is kind of the main thing that we're looking for with stealth, crit strike chance for combo points, and the ability to run Cold Blood. On Fatebound, this is huge. On Deathstalker, not as huge, and you would do something like this, right? Like you would do something like this, or something like this, or you could go something like this if you really want to, right? But lethality, really good talent. So you're giving up lethality, and then you're getting 1 additional charge. What does 1 additional charge do, right? This is hingent on the entire conversation around stealth. 1 additional charge. Now, we can look at something else that gives 1 additional charge in order to kind of estimate how this works. Lightweight Shiv gives us an additional charge of Shiv. It doesn't give us more casts, right? We can still only cast 1 Shiv every 30 seconds. However, giving us an additional charge allows us to cast 2 Shivs with every Kingsbane. That's a pretty good gain, because we get to double Shiv every Kingsbane. 1 additional charge of Vanish, however, doesn't really line up with anything, right? Just on the pure rotational gameplay, 1 additional charge of Vanish doesn't line up with Deathmark, because Deathmark is 2 minutes and Vanish is 2 minutes. If Vanish is on cooldown, this extra Vanish charge isn't doing much. So you have to think of a situation where you have 2 charges of Vanish that you can use sort of back to back in order to get value from them, and then also hold on to Vanish charges in order to get it to recharge. Because if you just cast Vanish on cooldown, you get 1 additional cast of Vanish in like a 40-minute dungeon. And that can't be it, right? Some players hold on to Vanish specifically for a chain pull. In that situation, you're getting 2, maybe 3 additional casts of Vanish. I looked through some logs, I don't have them open right now, but looking through some logs, people who hold Vanish for chain pulls and for like big situational pulls are getting 2 to 3 extra casts of Vanish throughout an entire dungeon without a trace. 2 to 3 extra casts of Vanish just ain't it. I hate to break it to you, but after that entire conversation, this ain't it. It's just not good. And I wish it was. I wish Without a Trace was a 60-second reduction on Vanish. Make it a 1-minute Vanish, just like Shadow Dance was. This would be really good. We'd take this all the time, permanently, everywhere. I'd be rocking it. I would be in love. Because bleed spreading, really fun. The way it is right now, this thing is ass. And there is nothing to be done about it. So with that rant out of the way, take a little bit of a breather. And let's talk openers, let's talk rotation. Let's talk damage stuff. And then hopefully we can get out of here in under an hour and a half. No promises. All right. So let's talk openers. Fatebound is kind of the easy one to explain. Spread your bleeds, get your maintenance up, go into your cooldowns. If you notice, and if you've seen the other video, single target, get your bleeds up, get your maintenance, press your cooldowns, envenom. Well, bleeds, maintenance, cooldown, envenom. Whoop-de-doo, we're in business. The one thing to note is that we need to apply Caustic Spatter somewhere, and bleed spreading is something that is finicky and has rules attached to it. So rule number 1 is always have enough energy to cast stuff. This depends a little bit on your haste, and it also depends a little bit on your crit, because you're going to be generating more combo points. In general, however, the rule is around 5 bleeds. Like roughly 5 bleeds, and you're good to go. Which, if you remember, Scent of Blood, 5 ruptures gives us 20% agility. That's good stuff. So, the opener here overcaps us so hard. If we're opening from stealth, 1, 2, this is 6 Garrotes. 6 Ruptures, and then we can get even more Garrotes out if we need to. For the sake of argument right now, we're just going to do like 5 target as an example. You don't need to press these extra Garrotes. These extra Garrotes are only if you have more targets that don't already have Garrote. So for 5 targets, we just Garrote, Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, good to go, right? And then you can get your Crimson Tempest up. You can apply your Caustic Spatter. The order here doesn't really matter, I'm going to be honest. I just need to put something on the infographic. But if you want to apply Caustic Spatter first and then Crimson Tempest, that's fine. If you don't want to apply Crimson Tempest and you want to apply it over here in your cooldowns, that's fine too. But for this, we're applying Crimson Tempest first because it does a ton of damage. Then we're going into our cooldowns. Again, we have this optional block of getting Envenom up before your Kingsbane. This is a gain for your Kingsbane window because you have poisons going into your cooldowns with the Envenom buff. But this is really slow. And especially in dungeons where targets die in 15 to 20 seconds, you can't be wasting 3, 4, 5 seconds on getting your Envenom up before you cast your 15-second cooldowns. It's just too slow. So in a lot of lower keys, especially now with heroics, right? Heroic dungeons, that's when I'm recording this video. A lot of this needs to be sped up. And so how do you speed up or accelerate your opener? Step 1, skip this Envenom. You don't need it. Step 2, you're going to want to cast Slice and Dice as early as possible, like over here, right after you get out of your opener. So you would like Garrote, Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, Fan and Knives, get your Slice and Dice up, and then go directly into your Death Mark, right? Just go directly into your Death Mark. That is as fast as it goes. And then this Mutilate will apply Caustic Spatter, and you'll be good to go, right? You want to maintain Caustic Spatter, and that's your cooldowns. Like spread your bleeds to your couple targets, get your Scent of Blood stacks, and then just slam your cooldowns. It is better to get a bad cooldown out than not get it out at all, right? If you're wasting 10 seconds getting your Kingsbane up and the target dies 5 seconds later, that is a wasted Kingsbane. If the first 5 seconds of your Kingsbane kind of suck, but you get 10, 15 seconds of your Kingsbane, big Kingsbane, we like that. So slam cooldowns first and foremost. If you have the time, you can start delaying, but casting things on cooldown, hitting things, big gain. The same thing is true for Deathstalker, but we have the added bonus of needing to play around the mark. So let me explain what's going on here. If you have the Capstone buff, you don't need to ambush, right? Because with the Capstone buff, you can apply it from this Envenom. But if you don't have the Capstone buff, you need to apply the mark. So this needs to be an ambush on your first GCD. After that, same concept. Spread your bleed, right? Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, Garrote. Get your Crimson Tempest up. Get your Slice and Dice up. Echoing Reprimand. And then, you know, cooldowns. Again, same logic applies. Bad cooldowns, better than no cooldowns. So if you need to skip this Envenom, if you need to skip this Slice and Dice, get it up during your Death Mark, whatever the hell you need to do to make sure that your cooldowns are lasting for the target, do it. Right? Spread your bleeds directly into your cooldowns. Get it out. Get it onto the targets. Just get it out there. And those are kind of the two openers. If you don't have stealth, right, you're going to probably do something like this. So again, you're going to Garrote, you're going to Rupture, you're going to get all your stuff out, and then you're just going to vanish in order to apply your mark, right? You can vanish into the mark, you can vanish into Garrotes, you have 6 seconds. If you don't have Vanish and you don't have anything, then you need to start Fan and Knivesing and getting Ruptures out, because again, energy is the most important. So let me show you an example of how these would look, right, in practice. In practice, right, if you're stealthed like I am, what's going to happen, if I just make sure that this is up, I'm just going to apply a couple poisons. I have 5 targets. I'm playing Fatebound, so I don't need to worry about the Deathstalker ambush. If I do, I would just ambush first GCD, right? I'm going to Garrote until everything has Garrotes, I'm now at a finisher level, so I'm going to Rupture, Rupture again. Now everything has Rupture. I can Crimson Tempest here. I can get up my Slice and Dice, and now I'm going to pick one target and go into my cooldowns. Right? If you're interested in any of the UI, it's going to be in the description as well. So you can get that. And so here, big single target, end of my cooldowns. I'm going to refresh my Crimson Tempest. I still have all of my Ruptures going, and so now I need to start rupturing, getting out a couple of extra Ruptures for my energy. So I'm just Fanonizing, and now I'm back on my main targets. Refresh my Crimson Tempest, right? We're back. We're just spamming Envenoms again, right? Fanonize, Fanonize, Envenom, Fanonize, Fanonize, Envenom. Maintaining Caustic. More Envenoms, more Envenoms. By now, the pack should easily be dead, but if you need to, you can just go again. Right? You can just hit it up. Get your Crimson Tempest rolling. Apply a couple of Ruptures here to make sure you have Sense of Blood. And then we're back on the priority target, and we're just maintaining all of our stuff again. Right? And this is doing a decent amount of damage on its own. Kingsbane comes up, we can go back into Kingsbane. And we're just maintaining everything. This is sort of a single target thing. If we want to vanish, we can also vanish, right? Like this. Get our Garrotes up. Crimson Tempest. We're doing big things. Maintain Caustic Spatter. And this is just over and over, always what we're doing. We just got our proc on our capstone. Sometimes we're unlucky like that. We need to Fan and Knives a bunch. Right? Okay. So, let's run away, reset our Bone Spike stacks, and let's look at what that would look like without stealth at the start. It's going to look very similar to what our opener looked like, or what it looked like during the rotation to just cast Ruptures, right? So here we are, not in stealth, right? So if we're not in stealth, I'm going to wait for the Carnage timer to tick. Right? I have a target. Let's say this target here is my focus. Okay? So we're going to make sure that that target has bleeds. Now Bone Spike is going to give us a couple of resets here. We're going to get bleeds up, and then at some point, depending on how important our AoE is, we're going to Crimson Tempest. Again, energy, 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 and now we're going to pick our target here. And we can just go into our cooldowns. Right? And now we're in rotation. I'm not caring too much about the Envenom here. It is good to have, but in general, I want my bleeds up so that I can have my energy, right? That is the main thing. I can use a T, right? And this is just, again, cooldowns are done. We're going to Rupture a couple things. We're going to get a couple of bleeds up. I can Garrote for some extra energy if I need to. I can maintain Crimson Tempest. And so my bleeds are dropping off of my targets, right? But that's okay. It's not about maintaining your bleeds on everything. It's about spinning the plates, right? We're a dot class. And so because we're a dot class, that means that sometimes our plates are going to fall. That's just a fact of life. You're not always going to have 5 Ruptures up on every single target. And that's okay. You have to be okay with that. The main thing is that you try your best to get up as many bleeds as possible, that you have the energy to keep going, right? Like here, I noticed that I'm dipping below 50 a lot, so I'm going to try and get another couple bleeds out. And this is sort of good enough, right? This is good enough for the most part. And if we're chaining, right, there's the added benefit of Venomous Wounds. If an enemy dies while afflicted by a Rupture, we regain energy based on its remaining duration. So we have the concept of Rupture Sniping, or just sniping in general. If you're chaining, let's say that this dummy right here, right, I'll mark it Cross. Let's say Cross is about to die, and we're pulling the next pack over here. Well, I can hit this guy with a Rupture, and then start going over here. And even though I don't have a lot of bleeds out, right, as this marked target over here dies, it's going to give me a big burst of energy, like 150 energy. And that helps me sustain my energy as I go into the next pack, right? So let's say this is our remaining pack. I Rupture this guy, and then, oh, time to pull the next pack. I'm chaining, I'm going. This target over here is gonna die and give me back a bunch of energy, which will help me sustain going into this pack. Right? That's one of the core things of chaining, is that you're able to use the momentum of the last pack going into the next pack. So that's sort of the thought process, right? Bleeds if I need energy. Scent of Blood is really good. I should be spreading Ruptures for Scent of Blood. My Crimson Tempest is doing a lot of damage. My Caustic Spatter is doing a lot of damage. So once I have my bleed set up, it's Caustic Spatter, it's cooldowns, it's Crimson Tempest. And if we look at any of these pulls that are long, like this one was a 2-minute pull, you'll see 35% of my damage was Caustic Spatter, Crimson Tempest, right? And that's not counting Sanguine Blades. The Sanguine Blades on this Crimson Tempest was probably pushing me to almost, like, probably close to 35%. Then you have Rupture up next, which is just me spreading for Scent of Blood, right? And again, more Sanguine Blade damage. And then Garrote at the bottom here. This is the 2-minute pull where I had my cooldowns at the start and then didn't have my cooldowns, right? So you'll see Caustic Spatter and Venom, my cooldowns are down here, right? They're kind of okay. Bone Spike is doing a little bit of damage, but it's mostly Crimson Tempest, Caustic Spatter, Rupture, Sanguine Blades. Those are your 4 big boys. That's where the damage is coming from. And so if you're spinning the plates and the plates fall, that's okay, because you're doing a lot of damage just off these 4, right? Garrote in here also helps. Fan of Knives, of course, also helps. You're hitting a lot of things with Fan of Knives. But in general, just spin your plates, get your energy up, pick a target, Caustic Spatter, and go. Cool. Let's talk some more specific things about Deathstalker. And then we'll talk about how some of this changes with talent builds, talent archetypes. Then we need to talk about gear, enchants, embellishments, all that fun stuff. And we're at an hour. Are we having fun? I'm gonna take another sip because I've been talking for a long time. Make sure to stay hydrated. Refreshing. All right, let's talk Deathstalker. This is going to be, in my opinion, the go-to hero talent because of the prio damage, right? Extra Envenom damage, extra prio damage. Singular Focus, crazy prio damage. So it plays very similarly, the mark plays very similarly to Caustic Spatter, right? You still want to pick your 1 target, and you're going to want to go ham on it. Otherwise, it plays very similarly. So if I just go in here, I need to apply the mark. I don't have the capstone, so I'm going to ambush, and then I'm going to go into my regular thing. So I'm going to Rupture, I'm going to Garrote, right? I'm going to get my Crimson Tempest up, I'm going to get my Slice and Dice into my cooldowns, get my Caustic Spatter, bingo, bango, bongo. Now I need to reapply the mark, 7 combo points, right? And then I'm going to get my bleeds up again. Very nice. And now we're just back into the rotation. Get the mark up again. Good to go. Right? I see some bleeds dropping. We can quickly go over that. If you have a mouse over macro and you're comfortable with using mouse over macros, this would be a pretty good situation. Now let's say I want to apply the mark here, so I have the capstone, so let's apply the mark to this guy instead. And now this guy needs bleed so that we can Caustic, and we're back into the rotation, right? Easy peasy. Let's apply the mark again. Boom. We're running a little low on energy. Let's get some energy out. Let's get some Scent of Blood stacks here. Sometimes I finish on 4. Finishing on 4 isn't the most ideal, but if you're just trying to get energy out, you can totally do it. I think situationally it is very good to just get your bleed out. and make sure that you're able to get the energy going. I'm going to use a T charge here during Shiv just to maintain myself a little bit. And then I'm going to apply the mark to something else, say this guy. And then we're back to Rupture. We're back to all of our regularly scheduled fun things. Maintain Crimson Tempest, get some more Scent of Blood out, a little bit of extra energy. Yeehaw. Having a good time. And this is, again, just the standard rotation as before. In this case, I'm going to Crimson Tempest because why not? I want the prio, but I want it on this target. So I'm going to move it over. I'm going to Crimson Tempest beforehand. Incredible. And so this is just, again, same rotation as Fatebound over and over and over. You're just applying bleeds, you're spinning the plates, except this time you have to also spin the mark. So now that the mark's on this target, I'm going to cool down this guy. Make sure that I am maintaining. I'm going to vanish here for the extra bleeds. Boom. And yeah, it's just this over and over and over, right? Same rotation, you're just also juggling the mark on top. And if we look at the breakdown, you'll see similar things, right? Caustic Spatter, Crimson Tempest, again, big parts of my damage. You'll see Corrupt the Blood. This is Rupture damage. You can add this onto Rupture, so this is another 3.5% on top of the Rupture. Singular Focus. This is pure single target damage, right? Pure single target damage. So this is 8 million to my prio target. That is an insane amount, because Envenom itself only did 13. So this is a big chunk of extra prio damage, and this is what makes Deathstalker so good. But the breakdown, as you can see, is very similar. Still have Caustic Spatter, still have Crimson Tempest, still have Rupture, still have Sanguine Blades. This is Rupture damage. This is damage from mostly our bleeds and Caustic Spatter, so this kind of spreads out throughout these things. You have Clear the Witnesses. This is Fan of Knives damage, right? So, again, spin your plates, make sure they're not falling, but if some fall, that's just life. And you're going to be doing damage regardless. Also, this is a banger song. This brings back good memories. Now, hopefully that covers most of the rotational things. Let me think for a second if I have something else to explain. I guess I'll do a little priority thing if you're still having trouble getting it going. So first priority should be getting out your stealth bleeds, right? Like Carnage, you want Rupture and Garrote out. This is really important because Carnage is a good button, a good talent. Carnage spreads your bleeds, gets your energy up, helps your opener really well. So this is priority number 1. That's why if you look at your opener, like over here, Carnage, these first 6 seconds, just Garrote and Rupture in at least mass AoE, right? Obviously in like 5 target, you don't need to Garrote this many times, but getting your bleeds out from stealth, priority number 1. Then you have Crimson Tempest and Slice and Dice. These are sort of interchangeable. Slice and Dice is really good for single targets, but if you just want to do more overall, then getting the Crimson Tempest out first is probably better. But you never want to go into a situation where you press Kingsbane without Slice and Dice. Slice and Dice and auto attacks are the large majority of your poison applications for Kingsbane. And so making sure that you have Slice and Dice up before going into your Kingsbane rotation is really important. But you can switch these two up however you wish. And then you're applying Caustic Spatter, right? Making sure Caustic Spatter is applied. If you're not envenoming and you're not, doing your poison bombs, you're not hitting the target, if you're tabbing to other things, Caustic Spatter isn't doing much, right? The majority of Caustic Spatter is envenoms, it's auto attacks, it's fate-bound coins, right? So unless you're hitting the target actively, Caustic Spatter can kind of be thrown by the wayside. So if I'm running up to a target here and I'm like, oh, I don't have any bleeds, well, I need to apply bleeds first, right? And so once I apply all my bleeds, and I get my my Slice and Dice up, now I'm able to use Caustic Spatter. This is where the Caustic Spatter damage comes in. And that Caustic Spatter shouldn't be there, and it's pissing me off. 421976. 421976. 421976. And now it's not coloring at all. Mamma mia. How did I break it? Whatever, I'll fix that later. Beyond me. Whatever. Yeah, but that's sort of the idea, right? You want your bleeds up, but if you're spreading bleeds, Caustic isn't doing anything. So spread your bleeds, then do Caustic. If you don't have any bleeds, like any plates to spin for your bleeds, Caustic is the thing that's cranking. And that's just the loop over and over. Maintain, Caustic, maintain, Caustic, maintain, Caustic. So let's look at some sims. Let's look at some numbers now that we've covered all of that. And we'll hopefully wrap this up in under 2 hours. Sounds like a good time. All right. So again, this is just Dungeonslice. Again, you'll see Crimson Tempest, Rupture, Garrote, Envenom, Caustic Spatter. Dungeonslice has a single target boss and lower target cleave. So of course on 5 targets where my stuff was doing way more than that, it's not going to show as much Envenom damage. Where is it? This one, for example, right? Caustic Spatter, Crimson Tempest on 5 target is very big. Overall, Envenom is going to catch up a little bit because of single target damage, right? Cool. Then we have this stuff, which we already talked about. And so now let's look at some talent comparisons. If you're new to Assassination, I'm going to be talking about 3 different archetypes of talents. Hybrid, Bleed, and Cleave. If you don't know what those are, let's go over it. The bottom section here of the talent tree, right? We have 5 capstones. We split this up into sort of 3 archetypes. So if you take the right side here, with Dragon Tempered Blades, King's Bane, right? You take this whole section. That's what we call hybrid, because you're taking both the King's Bane and Poison nodes, as well as, you know, Amplifying Poison, Fatal Concoction. But you're also taking a lot of the bleed nodes, Sudden Demise, Scent of Blood, right? So that's a hybrid build. And as we scroll down here, you'll see that Fatebound is currently the highest simming, but Deathstalker very close in overall damage. I'll talk about priority as we get closer to that, but one thing at a time. Deathstalker, same build. This is a hybrid build. So this is the go-to, right? And you'll see, again, lethality, really good. It's beating out Echoing Reprimand stuff. So keep that in mind. Then the next build, you'll see, takes Arterial Precision. This is kind of what we'd call a cleave build, because it takes the left side of the tree. Now, notably, this is the only type of build that takes Arterial Precision. This is a single target heavy build. It min-maxes boss damage, not prio damage, mind you, only boss damage. And this is essentially what the raid build looks like, except it takes Caustic and Indiscriminate Carnage. Those are kind of the 2 changes. Now, the thing to note about Arterial, right? This is the only build that takes it, but with Arterial, what you can do is you can macro T to your Shiv, because it is worth it in 4 target AoE to T for the Mastery buff with Arterial and Crimson Tempest. So if your Crimson Tempest is going, and you press Shiv and it AoEs with Arterial, you can then press T regardless of the energy. You just press it for the mastery. Without Arterial, you want to be pressing Thistle Tea for the energy, mostly. But with Arterial, you can press it for the mastery. So if this is something you're interested in, the build right in front of you here is the most lazy-ass rotation that you will ever get on Assassination in any patch. You can macro Cold Blood into your Envenom. You can macro Thistle Tea into your Shiv with Arterial Precision. That eliminates both of these buttons. You are not playing Echoing Reprimand. You are not playing something crazy out of the blue that requires you to hit the marks, right? You're playing Fatebound, you're not playing Deathstalker. You don't even need to track the marks. You don't need to track these coins. You just play the game. So this is peak lazy. Spread your bleeds, press your cooldowns, and the spec plays itself. Yes, it comes at a damage loss. Yes, it's worse in AoE. It does decent single target though, and it's very simple. So if that's what you're into, that's an option. And then as we keep going, we see some wacky shit, which is why this video is so complicated, because I need to account for everything and then filter it to you. But stuff like this exists, and it proves to me that God is dead. We're taking Dragon Tempered Blades here, but we're not taking Amplifying Poison. Why, you might ask? Beats the hell out of me, man. But in this situation, you would take Deadly Poison and Instant Poison. Now, this does have our Execute back with Zoldyck and Blindside. So if that's what you're into, cool. But you do lose a lot of prio damage and the plate spinning of Scent of Blood. Scent of Blood, again, carries the spec, especially in prio damage. So not having Scent of Blood here kind of really blows. You're also not getting Arterial, so again, no macro on Thistle Tea. So this is a really weird build. But we can get weirder, right? So this build, this is almost what we'd call a bleed build. Except for some reason it takes Poison Bomb. Poison Bomb, kind of okay. Clearly, because we're taking it. But, again, you could swap these 2 points into Sense of Blood, and that would be a true bleed build, because we're not taking any of the poison stuff in the middle here. This is fine, though. It's kind of dependent on which one you prefer. And again, no Dragon Tempered Blades, so only Deadly Poison. If you were to take it, then Instant Poison, because we don't have Amplifying. And we can keep scrolling through these. That's the one we just saw. And we'll see more and more weird stuff. This is a very traditional bleed build. It doesn't have Arterial, but it has all of the bleed nodes. So that is very similar to what we just saw, right? We also have a bleed build like this, which I think is what I just clicked on. They're all starting to kind of mush together in my head, right? Yeah, so this is a bleed build, but it takes Arterial instead of Sudden Demise. Then we see Arterial here with no Kingsbane, if that's what you're into. I wouldn't recommend this. This is a huge loss in single target. But if you're doing just heroic dungeons like you are currently in this week and everything is exploding, maybe this is an option. I played a build for normal dungeons that did not take Kingsbane and did not take Deathmark. I untalented my 2-minute cooldown because it was getting no value because bosses were dying in legitimately 11 seconds. So if you're just spamming heroics, spamming normals, everything's dying, not taking Kingsbane's probably a decent option. In actual M+, though, forget it. You always take Kingsbane. The single target loss is way too high. You see the same thing with Deathstalker here, right? Like Deathstalker, you got your Cleave build, right? You're taking Echoing Reprimands, all the same. Cleave, you're starting to see the archetypes maybe, right? Cleave, but we're taking Tiny Toxic instead of Blindside. Here, again, Bleed build, no Kingsbane, but we're taking Tiny Toxic in this one, right? And so we're just scrolling through here, and so now at this point we're like 3% behind. But you can see, 3% isn't that much, honestly. Like, this is still playable. And this build is wild, because we're not taking Kingsbane. But it's fine. It's chillin'. Like, this is okay. A lot of things you can play, a lot of things you can do, as long as you understand what's happening, right? As long as you understand Scent of Blood is big. As long as you know that Shrouded and Bone Spike speed up your opener, and Caustic and Crimson Tempest are the large parts of your damage. You can play around with it and kind of get away with anything you want to get away with, because this spec plays literally everything. So I have some comparisons here to further drive home this point. If we look, this is these are going to be 2-minute fights, right? So like shorter M+ fights. We don't need to do 5 minutes because 5-minute boss fights don't exist. But 2-minute, 1-target boss fight. We see Deathstalker well ahead, right? Well ahead of Fatebound. Another reason why I think that Deathstalker is going to be played in higher M+ keys. And you'll see that the cleave build, right? The ones that take Blindside, Zoldyck, right? On the left side of the tree. It's ahead very slightly in single target. Very slightly on a boss compared to hybrid. You'll see the same thing with Fatebound here. Fatebound hybrid, Fatebound cleave. They're very close. And then the bleed build, right? Bleed build kind of sucks. I'm not even comparing the Deathstalker bleed build, because if you're playing Deathstalker bleed, you are getting all of the downsides with none of the benefits. So I wouldn't do that, but if you really want to, I mean, go for it. I just don't. And you'll see that bleed with Sense of Blood, like no Kingsbane here, this is really bad in single target. This is the bleed build that skips Kingsbane, takes Arterial. This sucks because you don't have Kingsbane, and so your Shivs are bad, and your Kingsbanes are bad, and everything sucks. Don't play this. It's just not necessary. However, the story changes a little when we get more targets. This is 5 targets now for 2 minutes, and you'll see all of a sudden the hybrid builds are cruising. They are cruising. And you'll see Bleed Sense, no Kingsbane is our 3rd best option. Why is that? Well, Sense of Blood, lots of damage in AoE, but especially prio damage. Deathstalker hybrid, big prio. Huge prio, even compared to cleave. This is 10% more prio damage, just from changing some talents. Sense of Blood is the big boy here. Sense of Blood is a large part of why hybrid is doing so much more prio damage than anything else, which is why I am recommending prio for all of the high keys, because good God, this is crazy. And compared to a Fatebound build, this is 20% ahead. This is 300,000 DPS ahead, hybrid to hybrid. That's crazy! And if you look at just how much damage Sense of Singular Focus alone is doing, that's 160,000 damage to a single target, right? So it's doing 10% of your single target damage in 5 target AoE. Like Singular Focus, right? Singular Focus is 10% of your single target in 5 target AoE. That's bonkers. That is Capstone's level of good. That is how strong it is. So even though your details might say, "Oh, it's doing 3%, it's so bad." No, this is 3% of your overall damage to 1 target. This is bananas. And if we go to 8 target, I mean, that's 15% hybrid over cleave, brother. That's 15%. And you can see on 8 targets, how much is Singular Focus doing? 260,000. 260,000 single target damage. 15% of your single target damage is coming from Singular Focus. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. I cannot understate how bananas that is. It is so good. Anyways, let's talk some gear and some other stuff, some embellishments, and then let's wrap it up, because I could go on for days. For days. The main things to look for here, Dawn Thread, right? Crit when over 80% health. This has really high uptime. It is even higher uptime than Blue Silk Lining and Dragonflight. Blue Silk Lining was 90%. This is 80%, which means you have double, if not more, the uptime. Well, not quite double, but the uptime's really good. So, lots of crit, really good uptime. This is generically good. And so, even with all of the tuning passes that they're doing for embellishments, this is the safe option. Now, as they're tuning trinkets, as they're tuning embellishments, this might not be the best. And I don't want to eat my words and be like, oh, craft it, it's going to be the best. Because they can easily tune this to not be the best. But what it will not be is the worst. And that's what matters, because embellishments kind of suck this expansion, I'm going to be honest. Like, none of them are really good. But this is just generically good. It doesn't have a proc chance. It's consistent. It's the best right now in single target. It's the best right now in AoE. It is just good. Okay, so just craft it. Boots are a good slot. Belt is a good slot. Wrists are a good slot. Chillin'. Again, Stormbound armor kit on your legs, just like normal. Crit enchants, mastery enchants, crit, mastery, haste, all good. Crit and mastery mainly. I don't have a diamond in here, but you would want to get a diamond. And then if you super want to min-max, you would get one of each color, right? So you get a verse gem, a haste gem, a crit gem, a mastery gem, in order to buff up that crit value. It is super min-max, though. And honestly, if you don't care about micromanaging your gems and shit, just slam crit mastery everywhere. It's not that important. Of course, we take the nature damage ring. It's just like the Aeronog ring from Dragonflight. Good stats and bonus damage. It's just free. Thanks for the follow, Sigil, if you're watching. A shout out to my Twitch. I stream on Twitch sometimes. You can come ask questions there. Otherwise, you know, just crit mastery. Some verse is okay. Crit mastery, crit mastery. This is haste mastery, because haste is still pretty good. We're chilling. Trinket-wise, Scardens. Go to best always. Transmitter sucks. Transmitter is the only other trinket that you would be wearing in this slot, and it blows. It is awful to use. Don't bother. Just forget it exists. You'll be happier that way. Just farm a Scardens. Then you have Empowering Crystal here. This is just an RNG random secondary. All of our secondaries are good, which means that this is good. But there are some alternative options. I know these icons are a little small. I can't do anything about that. It's just raid bots being weird. Even if I hella zoom in like this, they're still tiny. What am I supposed to do? Anyways, so Scardens, again, always play it. But Sack Brood, also good. This is just primary stat. So again, random passive proc. Basically any random passive proc in this slot is perfectly fine. You don't have to do anything special. For weapon enchants, you want Authority of Radiant Power for Mythic Plus. Depths is slightly better for single target. So if you're raiding, kind of need to either swap if you're super giga min-maxing, or just use Radiant Power, or just use Depths. It's not that big of a deal. Any of these are fine. Either of those two, you won't notice. You won't notice. So again, Sack Brood is good. This embellishment with versatility, this is Dusk Thread, not Dawn Thread, but Dusk Thread. Dusk Thread. This is also fine. You can play that if you want. We also have, where's the other one? This thing. Damage dealt to the target. This is single target. This isn't as good as Dawn Thread in single target either, but this is also fine. You could wear this if you'd like. If you're expecting tuning to come up, or you just want to see another little tiny bar on your details meter, you have options. You also have options with the Mercurial Egg here. This is basically also just passive stats. The on-use here is pretty pointless, I'm going to be honest. But it's stats, right? Stats. Again, we have all of the fire damage stuff split between enemies, or the random target damage. Very cool. Here we have Deathstalker, again, same thing. Sack Brood, fire damage, split, versatility, damage, right? We can keep going. Mercurial Egg, all of the random stuff that we already have seen. Is there anything new coming up? Probably not. Here is just a random unembellished wrist. So you can see the value of the embellishment. A whopping 0.7% for Dawn Thread. Nice. Embellishments really matter this expansion. Yippee. 0.7% from an embellishment is nothing. Again, this is another embellishment. Just doesn't do anything. This has a shield on it. And, like, again, this doesn't do damage, but it has a shield. So I want to equip it to show you guys if you really want the shield. If you want something defensive, 0.7% is not a lot. So here you go. This is your option. But yeah, I mean, we can scroll through. None of this really matters. Again, here you see Harvest's Edict, random passive damage, Trinkets, right? Some other stuff is the Spyglass from Siege of Borealis. This thing, the Siege of Borealis. This guy's also really good. So those are kind of the things you're looking for. Again, you can always Droptimizer yourself. You can always Top Gear yourself. There is a neat feature in Top Gear now, if you have not been aware, item search. So we can look up Spyglass. And there it is. Deadeye Spyglass. We can do item level 900. And now this is a Spyglass, item level 900, right there. Boom. Yeah, we can just take that. We can just use it. Now, the other thing you might be wondering is the good old Siphoning Stiletto. This is a embellished dagger, and if you watched my video on why daggers suck, you'll know that offhand daggers don't mean shit for damage. So naturally, this would be a good option. Except, can you see what's wrong with this dagger? It's 2.6 attack speed. Why? No one knows. All these other daggers are 1.8, 1.8, 1.8. All of these are 1.8, 1.8. That's a sword, so that's 2.6, 1.8. So this dagger, agility dagger, rogue-only dagger, is the only dagger made in the last decade of this game, World of Warcraft, that has an attack speed slower than 1.8. Is it a bug? Is this a feature? If it's a feature, it's an awful feature. This thing sucks. This is the worst embellishment that is available to us, because 2.6 attack speed is trash. This thing is like minus 3% over like any other dagger here. Like any other non-embellished dagger, this thing is minus 3%. And it deals damage to you. Like this is a self-harming dagger that does no damage and is worse than anything within 10 item levels. It's baffling to me why this exists. I'm hoping it's a bug, and maybe it gets fixed, and then maybe I have to recommend this and change all the guides. But for now, why? So with that mini rant, there's nothing really else to talk about here. All of these things are kind of meh. Void Reavers is okay. Flayedwing is kind of okay. Spyglass, again, good option. Right? Sack Brood, good option. Edict, good option. Mercurial Egg, good option. Empowering Crystal, good option. Always play Scardens. Always play Transmitter if you don't have a Scardens, and then farm a Scardens because you really don't want to play Transmitter. Tier set, obviously. All the good stuff. Tiny embellishments for extra damage. Good to go. Yeah. That's it. We finished it. We got through it. We got through it all. Let's check the notes. Gems, enchants, embellishment, gear, rotation, openers. Oh boy, stealth conversation. That is actually a note that I wrote. We went over all the talents, all the hero talents, all the base concepts. We hit some dummies for a little bit. Is there anything more that I need to talk about? I think that's it. Yeah. I'm sure I forgot something, just like I did last video. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I will respond, as I always do. And, yeah. I also have a VOD up of me spamming heroic dungeons day 1. If you want to go pour over that. I did that for a couple hours. Because I filled out all of my heroic gear. Everything is adventurer, so I'm good to go for the heroic week. Anyways, drink your water and try to get more sleep than I do. Bye.